Today we're gonna create, or rather recreate, this Apple game that you're seeing on the screen. This will be the last video of the Python for Beginners series that I created here on YouTube. So the game is pretty simple. Apples are gonna fall. There's a maximum of 4 apples every time on the screen with different speeds, and they spawn at different places here on top of the screen. Whenever 3 of the apples fall to the ground below the screen, game ends, displaying our score and the restart button, which is not actually the button, it's just some text that if you click, the game restarts. You have over here to the top left corner the score and the amount of lives you still have left. And that's pretty much it. You can see a background image that I found online. It's not the best quality, but it's just some background. And then some apples that I was also able to find online. And we're also gonna work with the images to make sure we rescale them and delete the background. Okay, so I've organized the screen here, and we're only going to be using this Python file to code our game. We have 2 other files in the same directory, one for the Apple image and one for the forest background that I'm going to use. We're going to have to adjust the size of the background to the screen that we're going to create, and we're going to have to adjust some of the settings on this Apple image to make it short, because you can see this is the real size and we don't want to have an apple this big in our screen. So first, let's just import a few things. We're going to use the Pygame module to create this game. So we can get started importing Pygame. We're going to need to import sys as well. We're going to need to import from math, or rather just import random Pygame from Pygame locals port all, and from OS import path. Okay, these are the imports that we're going to need. Now, as you can see here, we'll have settings where we're going to just create some variables that we're going to use repetitively throughout the program. Images where we're going to import all of the, well, they're not that many images, but the apple and the forest, and we're going to treat them so they fit nicely into our screen. The window, I just brushed over the window. We're going to create the game window. So far we've been using programs in the terminal. They're not creating a window per se, like a software you'd install in your computer. Then we're going to have some global variables that are the score as well as your lives. We're going to create a method to display text to screen, which is going to contain the global variables as well as the text at the end of the game for restarting the game or to display the final score. And then finally, here we're going to have the main game loop, which is going to keep updating. So it's a process that repeats itself every few times a second. And for example, the notion of an apple falling is just an image of an apple being printed over and over at a different position in the screen. So this is a main game that's going to contain a while loop, and if a condition is met, meaning if the number of lives equals to 0, then we're going to stop the main game loop, and we're going to start the end game loop, which just presents us with the white rectangle with the final score and the option to restart. So first things first, let's create a window, which is going to help us troubleshoot if we have any problems, and it's going to give us something to display. Now Pygame has a function which is pygame.time.clock, and this is going to control how many times a second our program is going to be updated. So let's just give it a name. Now let's create our screen, assign it to the screen variable that I'm naming here, and to create a screen we're going to use the Pygame function, Pygame display set mode. We're going to pass in 3 numbers here. So the size of our screen is going to be, it's a tuple that contains 2 values, so let's just create other 2 variables as well, because I'm going to use them later on for different functions. Height and then that's going to be a tuple. I'm just going to use the size 1600 by 1000. And before I forget, I need to pass in 3 numbers here, or 3 variables. So the size, let's just do 0 and 32. This here is a parameter that represents the number of flags, which is, it's optional. We're going to just pass 0 because the parameter is mandatory. And then 32 is the number of bits we're going to use for a caller, which is also, it can vary. I'm just going to use 32 because that's what I found online, honestly. Then we're going to give our window a title. And it can really be anything. And then we're going to use the update method. We need to draw the screen, right? And then that's it. Let me just run the code and see what we get. Okay, a window was created, but then, you know, there's no reason to keep the program going. There's no loop going on, and the program just closed. You can see we don't get any errors because it essentially created a screen, and then it ended. It ran this once, and the program ended. Okay, let's add some images to this program so that we can add them to our screen and get the game going. Let me add the image for the apples. And these methods are methods that I'm researching to create the game. So you can notice we haven't seen any of these things in our course, right? We haven't seen the load method from the image package from the Pygame module. But those are things that I researched when trying to create a game. I found the Pygame module to be very friendly. It has a lot of the functions we need, so you can understand what it's doing. I'm just assigning the image to this variable for now. However, as I mentioned previously, we got to treat the image so that it displays properly, because right now the image is too big. So for the apple, the image is too big. I'm gonna apply a zoom on it, and the function to do that is the following. And here, this function is a combination of a zoom and an angle that we can change. So here we're transforming this image at an angle of 0 degrees, and we're gonna pass a zoom of 0.08 because the image is too big. We want to make it way smaller. Now the background, let's scale down the background. And the background needs to be the size of the screen. So here we can pass the size variable. We could use the scale function for the apple as well, but I wanted to give you this option. If in the future you're creating a game that you might need to angle objects, you might want to include here a variable, and then the apples are going to be created at different angles. But for this, we're just creating the apples at the same angle. And then lastly, in our screen, which is our window, we are going to blit the background at the location 0 and 0. And this needs to be a tuple, this second variable here. So let's save, run the code. Okay, so we don't have our background image in our screen yet. Here, let me try updating the display once the background, which is our forest, is blit into the screen. Let me update the display and see if I can see the forest there. Okay, the forest showed, so this worked, even if just for a second. So let's keep going. Now we don't have any errors here. Everything is working okay. So next, I'm gonna create the main game, just so we can keep seeing the screen constantly, and that's going to help us troubleshoot the rest of the game. And then I'm going to go back and create the rest of this. So for the main game, we're going to create the main game loop, which is not a class, it's just a function. This game needs to be running indefinitely. I'm just going to use the running variable and say while running, do the following. I'm going to need to get the mouse position to check when the mouse clicks and the mouse position is on top of an apple. Then, kill that apple, delete it, and change the score and so on. The Pygame mouse get position will give us an X and a Y position of the mouse in our screen. So we're gonna assign that X and Y to two variables, mx and my. Now we're gonna want to constantly update our screen. And one important thing at this point that you don't want to run this code before doing is checking if the player is clicking the X at the corner of our window, because even if you don't set this up, then it's gonna be delayed when you're trying to exit the game. So for this, what we want to do is, for all events that happen every fraction of a second, there are a lot of events happening. So, and every fraction of a second generates a list of events. So for every event in Pygame event get, and this is a method that gets all the events Pygame is registering in a list, if the event type equals to quit, then we're going to use the sys function to exit the game. Let me save and run. Okay, we're not getting an error, but we're being kicked out pretty soon. Let me see what's going on here. Let me try to continually display our background to the screen. Nope, that's not it. It feels like oh, I know what it is. So I created this game loop, but I'm not calling it. So what's happening is Python is reading everything. It's executing, it's displaying it once, but it's still not executing this main game loop. So what I need to do is just call the main game loop. And here we are. Now when I click the X, the game comes out easily, goes away. I don't believe, well, maybe, let's see if I need to draw the background. Yeah, I didn't think so. I don't need to keep drawing the background every time. I just need to keep updating the display. The background is already drawn to the display here, to the screen. Okay, so I've started the main game loop. Now let's do the Apple class. And when thinking about apples, they're going to have their own image. They're going to have a speed. They're going to have a random position where they're created. So okay, let me quickly run over to what's happening here. So the apple that I'm creating, it's gonna follow the class of sprites. Sprites is a class in the Pygame library that has many functionality. We didn't go over this in the series, but what happens is when a class inherits another, it pulls automatically a lot of the functionality, all the functions essentially, and some and variables that the class where they're inheriting from has. So for example, sprite has a lot of pre-built functionality that now Apple's gonna have as well. So for this, I need to initiate Apple. I need to initiate the sprite class, and then I'm creating all the variables within my Apple. So my Apple's gonna have an image, which is gonna be the Apple we created here. Here. Then it's gonna have the rect is the rectangle that holds that image. So the image is drawn, all images on Pygame are drawn on top of a rectangle. And this is only for me to obtain that rectangle. So if I need, I can, delete it and consequently delete the apple or move it around and so on and so forth. And as you can see here, the position, the X position of that rectangle, which I'm assigning here, and the Y position of that rectangle is what I'm assigning here. I'm not drawing the X and Y positions of the image apple. I'm doing the X and Y positions of the rectangle where my apple is drawn. I hope that makes sense. And then I'm also creating the speed with which the apples are gonna fall. And that's random because I want each apple to fall at a different speed. Now what I also need to do is update the apple, because otherwise they're going to be ecstatic. And for that, I'm going to create an update method, which is going to take in that apple and is going to change the position of that apple. And as you can remember, when I'm changing the position of the apple, I'm changing the position of the rectangle where that apple is drawn by the amount of speed with which that apple falls. And this is all it's going to do. The updating method that I'm creating, it's merely adjusting the position of that apple by the speed with which it falls. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I want to have at all times 4 apples. So let me just create 4 apples right out of the gate with a loop. Okay, first I need to create the all apples grouping, which it's a list with all the sprites. So for that, I forgot to do it before. Apples equal to Pygame sprite group. So this will group all sprites in this game to this all apples variable. And at this point there aren't any because I'm just defining things. But here with this loop, I'm going to create 4 apples, right? It's going to be from 1 to 4 because the second digit is non-inclusive. And then I'm going to add each time that new apple is going to be added to the all apples variable. And that's just going to make it easier for us to, update the screen with all apples and work with them. When the game ends, we're going to need to kill all the sprites, kill all the apples, and we're going to be able to perform that operation all here. Okay, so far, let's go back a little bit. We have only this one variable for settings. Our window seems to be done. All images are working fine so far. We have created apples. We still need to add score and lives. The text to screen also to display those variables still needs to be worked on. But here, what we can do is add apples to our loop so we can see them falling already. So here, let's do that. We're gonna need to add all apples and draw it to the screen. So all apples dot draw to the screen. This draw method draws this object to this variable. Now when I run this code, let's see what happens. So you can see here we have drawn all the apples, but they're not being updated. What we need to do is all apples dot update. All right, So they are updated, but the previous version of themselves is not being erased. This feels like it's a matter of the screen not being redrawn every time. It's just incorporating whatever new draws are showing up. So maybe what I need to do actually is at every new time this loop is happening, I need to redraw the background. And that's going to make whatever was drawn in the previous background to go away. And to do that, we need to do the blip method again. The blit, sorry. Okay, save and run. And now you can see previous apples are not showing because we're redrawing the background at every instance of this loop that's going on. Now, the apples are not dying when they fall below the screen level. We're just going to have to add an if statement to check if the position of that apple is low enough, then we're going to subtract a life. But before that, let's just create the global variables, which is easy enough. I'm just going to create a quick class that's going to help me. Global variables don't really take any values. I'm just going to do lives equals to 3 and then score equals to 0. Now, if I just do the logic here, we're not yet printing to the screen. And I'm confident this is not broken. You know, it's pretty hard to mess that up. But let me just create this function to draw things to the screen, and then we're going to be able to troubleshoot our lives and score. Okay, so this method we created, it's going to take a message, which is what we want to print to the screen, the color of that font, the size of the font, and the position in the screen where that is going to be displayed. Now you can see here we have this error because font name is a variable that I haven't created yet. But let me go back into the settings and I'm going to create the font name variable. And for this, let's use the Pygame method match font Comic Sans, and then this is gonna display the text in our screen with the Comic Sans, and as you can see here the error has disappeared. Okay, so we're using the font from our system in this function. We're gonna assign it to this variable font here, and then in this font we're gonna render the message and then color that I want the text to be displayed in. I'm going to get the rectangle where this text is going to be displayed so I can position the text accordingly, and the center of that text is going to be at the X and Y parameters, X and Y position that I'm going to say. And then we're going to draw the text on top of the text's rectangle. So let me just draw the text at the beginning of our game loop here. Message to screen is going to take a message. I want this to be your score is, and then I'm going to concatenate the global variables score value. Now the score is currently a number, so let me just do, if I convert this into an integer, it's going to be a problem because we're not going to be able to do math on it. So it's better if I just cast this value into a string every time. Then I want this to be in white with the size 24, and the position of this is going to be at the screen, but 5% of the screen width and 5% of the screen's height. So let me pull up Paint here. if this is my screen, then this is the height and this is the width, right? If I place my text, let's say this is 150, let's say this is 100. If I display my text at 150 for width and 100 for height, it's going to be displayed here. What I want is my text to show here, my score, and then my lives. So it's going to be a very small amount of width and a very small amount of our height. Hence, 5% of width, 5% of height. Now, white is not defined. I just wrote it here because then I can define it in my settings. And the RGB always take 3 numbers, red, green, and blue. And then let me just create a few other colors as well to facilitate my life in the future. And something to keep in mind is that RGB stands for red, green, and blue. So red is the full amount, 255, 0 green, 0 blue. Green, 0 red, full green, 0 blue. And then blue, which is not blood, it's blue, 0, 0, 255. Don't even think I'm going to use all of these colors. Just thought I could write it down, and in the future, if I want, it's already here. Might be something else for you to learn. Now, the score is drawn. Let me do the amount of lives. Okay, all these functions are complete. Save and run. Oh, something went wrong. Font constructor, line 1, line 333, it's not here. Font not initialized. Well, I found something, I don't know if it is. But I need to initialize all components of the Pygame library. This is not something we went about in our series, but we should initialize all components of this library. Let's see. Okay, I'm initializing everything. As you can see before, the error that we were getting, let me just run this again. Font not initialized. That should have clued me in. But okay, now we can move forward. So now we're not getting the error, but the text is not being displayed. I just realized that, which is better, but it's not optimal. So here I am bleeding in this function. Every time the loop happens, this message is running again, but we gotta display the text once the bleed function happens. Okay, now we got it. And as you can see, the variables 0 and 3 are not changing. So let's do that next. We gotta check for all the apples in all apples, and this to see if the height of that apple is below the screen. We kill it and change the lives variable. So here what we're doing is we're checking all the items in all apples. If the position Y, the vertical position of that rectangle, is bigger than the screen size in height, then kill that item. This is a function from Pygame. It's going to kill the sprite, and it's going to decrease the number of lives by 1. Save and run. And now 2 lives, pretty slow apples, 1 live. Okay, it's working. However, the problem is once we go below 0 lives, we keep going. And apparently there aren't any more apples being created. We created the 4 apples here once, but we gotta make sure that happens every time the number of apples go down. So we gotta create a new apple every time the height goes over the screen limit. Let's save and run. Okay, as you can see, apples are going below the screen. More apples are being created. Now, let's check for clicking the apples, killing the apples, and upping the score. That's why we have the mouse position set out. For that, we're gonna check if in the Pygame library we have actions for mouse. If mouse button down, or even better, let's do mouse get pressed. And then 0 is because it's the left button in the keyboard. If it's 1 is the scrolling wheel, if it's 2 it's the right button. If this button is pressed, meaning if this is true, then check if the collide point of the position is equal to the position of each apple. So we're gonna have to loop over again all apples and then check if item.rect.collide point is the same thing as the tuple where the mouse is. Then we're gonna have, if we press the button and check that all apples, if one of them is in the same position as the mouse when the button is clicked, then we're gonna kill that apple and we're gonna increase the score. And then again, create a new apple. Save and run. Click, 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 click. Cool, it's working. Score is changing, lives are changing. Now the last thing we have left to do is our end game function. After an apple dies, because it went under the screen, let's check if global variables lives equals to 0, then call the end game function we're going to create now. Sorry, if the logic operator is double equal sign. The end game function we're going to create here now, just like we created the main game. This is also going to be a loop. Again, we're going to have to check in this new loop, everything here stops, right? We're not showing the score. We're not updating the screen again. We kind of have to do everything over again. So we have to confirm that if the person is pressing the X button, then we're gonna quit. We don't need to change anything about the apples. We don't need to confirm whether we're pressing apples, but we're gonna need to confirm if we're pressing the restart button. But for that, we're gonna have to draw the background. We're gonna have to update the FPS count every time. We're not gonna need to update the apples though. And the mouse position, I'll leave it here for now, but I'm not sure if we're gonna use it. I am though going to draw to screen the message final score. This is gonna be a bit bigger. It's gonna be in blue, and then I am going to display at the center of the screen. What happens, this displays the score only, so I'm gonna create the white rectangle where this is going to be surrounded in. To create a white rectangle, pygame.draw.rect on the screen, and then I pass in a tuple with 4 values of where this rectangle is going to be drawn. Save. Let's run to see how it looks so far. Let the end game start. Obviously, this argument here. It's the color. Okay, the logic is not callable. This seems to be working fine. Pygame, draw right to the screen. Lights. Oh, sorry. Nice. And integers required for font. Where? Font is required, not double. What? Was this it? Have I switched? No. Oh yeah. Let's see if this works. Okay. Alright, so I can see the main game loop stopped, but the end game loop is not working properly. Probably because it's not drawing correctly everything. So I need to update the screen here once. So I'm drawing the rectangle, I'm blitting this text to the image, I'm blitting the background, and then I'm going to update my display with everything. The only thing is I'm gonna put my background here at the top of this loop just because I want to make sure that the background does not go in front of my rectangle or in front of my text. Save and run. Only thing is now we gotta wait for the apples to die. Cool, we're almost there. So I only need to add restart here and make that clickable and restart the game if I am clicking that. So this is a little bit tricky. The way that I found to do this is we're gonna, instead of using this function to draw restart and trying to figure out, you know, the exact rectangle where our mouse has to be in, because we can't get there's no function to get rect from this method. So I kind of cheated it a little bit, and what I did was I kind of recreated everything about the message to screen function just below here, just so it would be easy for me to get this text rect. I don't know if my brain is dead, if there's a much easier way to do this, but I don't have patience and we're close to wrap, so I just want to keep going. Now we want to check if pygame.mouse.getPressed, if it is the left button, so here what I'm doing, I'm checking if the function getPressed, which returns a list of zeros and ones, if the first item on that list is true, which means the left button of the mouse is clicked. If the position is colliding, if the position of the rectangle is colliding with my mouse position tuple, then what I need to do is set the score to 0, set the lives to 3, call the game, but I need to create apples. Save and run. Okay, this is working. Many apples died. Click. Oh, okay. Now something's gone wrong. Click. We're not killing all the apples from the previous game. This is not the worst bug in the world. So I feel like the easy way out here is just to kill all apples. So let me just do this. If I click restart for item in all apples, item.kill. Save, run. and done. Nice. So that's it. That's the last video of the series. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this was able to help you in your journey to become a Python developer. And I'm gonna leave some resources on the description of the video. Feel free to take a look there. They helped me a lot, and I hope they'll help you too. Thank you for watching, and all the best.